Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Askold Melnyczuk, and this afternoon I am speaking with Alim Aliev, who is Deputy Director of the Ukrainian Institute. He's a human rights defender. He's a manager of educational cultural projects, a researcher, a media consultant, and the co-author of a book, Mustafa Dzemilev, Unbreakable, about a Crimean Tatar leader. Welcome, Alim. It's a pleasure to speak with you this afternoon.
Good afternoon, dear Askold, and thank you for this conversation.
Well, I'd like to begin just by asking you about where you grew up, where you were raised, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I was born in Uzbekistan, in the Churchik city, because all of my family were deported to Central Asia in 1944. It was a genocide of Crimean Tatar people by Stalin regime, because all of Crimean Tatar deported to Central Asia, to Siberia, to Ural, and half of all of the nation died during this deportation. In 1989, our family was one of the first families who returned to Crimea, to our motherland. I grew up in western part of Crimea. My roots is from the Bakhchisarai, very special city to Crimean Tatars because it was a capital of Crimean Khaganate. But in late 18th, 19th, it was very problematically to buy houses or flats in this region or in some regions near the sea. That's why my parents bought the house in the village between Simferopol city, it's the capital of Crimea now, and Yevpatory, it's another big city in Crimea.
So, and what were your parents doing, and what was it like to return to Crimea after half a century of resettlement?
You know, my parents, from their childhood, they heard about Crimea, about motherland, and I talked about it 1 year ago with my mom, and she said that she thought that the Crimea is the best place in the world, and Crimea is a place with juicy fruits, very tasty fruits, with wonderful landscapes, with the Crimean Sea. But first of all, Crimea is our motherland, and all of Crimean Tatars should live in their own motherland. That's why after 45 years, our family, like families of a lot of Crimean Tatars, returned to Crimea.
What did they find there? What remained of what had been left behind? Was there any continuity? Were there institutions, Crimean Tatar institutions that had survived?
Yeah, you know, these first years were really hard because the local people who came to Crimea after the deportation, they thought that Crimean Tatars are very angry people, people who want to take their homes, and you know, very specific people. But in fact, Crimean Tatars, we returned just to the land. Yeah, we haven't any houses. We started to build our houses. We started to build our institutions, for example, the Majlis of Crimean Tatar people, the Kurultai of Crimean Tatar people is a self-governance institutions of Crimean Tatar people as indigenous people of Crimea and Ukraine as whole. And that's why we started to build our life in a new way in Crimea, from the renaissance of Crimean Tatar culture, Crimean Tatar language, to founding of new political institutions like a Medjlis. And Mustafa Dzhemilev, famous Soviet dissident, now he's a leader of Crimean Tatars. He was the first head of the Medjlis of Crimean Tatar people.
And how did the institutions develop, and how did relationships with the people who had come into Crimea after the Crimean Tatars had been deported evolve over the next 30 years?
Yeah, you know, Crimean Tatar, like Ukrainians, we have very strong horizontal ties. And that's why when the Medjlis established, we had a lot of local Medjlises in almost every villages and cities in Crimea where the Crimean Tatar lives. And that's why we have such very horizontal system of the management in Medjlis. And I think it's a democratic system because we have an elections, we have some Crimean Tatar parties who have their own programs and who elected or not elected to the Kurultai to Crimean, of the Crimean Tatar people. It was a lot of, I remember it was a very hard debate between the candidates, between these parties' views to the how Crimean Tatar nation should be developed in Crimea. Yeah, and in our area, among our family, a lot of people were involved to the life of social political life of Crimean Tatars, because you know it's one of the steps that help us to build our own subjectivity. Yeah. And that's why it's for today it's also important because Medjlis of Crimean Tatar people was banned in 2016 in Crimea.
What were the practical consequences of that?
Yeah, it means that Medjlis of Crimean Tatar people for Russian occupiers, it's an extremistic organization. Mm-hmm. The leaders of Medjlis, like Rifat Chuvarov, Mustafa Dzhemilev, they are personas non grata in Crimea. We started to work together in Crimea in a local Crimean Tatar newspaper of that name, Nariman Jilal. He's first deputy head of Medjlis of Crimean Tatar people, and during 8 years he was the most powerful of all of free people in Crimea. And now Nariman Jilal in a prison due fabricated political case, fabricated by Russia political case. And it means that for today, a lot of active members of Medjlis, of political system of Crimean Tatars, not in Crimea, but we have good connections between the people who live in Crimea and who lives outside of Crimea.
So before we get into your kind of adult work, I'd love to know what it was like kind of growing up there and going into schools there. What did you study, and what was sort of your path to your present work? You are working in cultural field.
My parents want that I will be a doctor. But
Everybody's parents want that.
yeah, but I have another choice, and I studied political science in Crimea in Tavrida National University, and Orange Revolution in Ukraine helps me to do such choice, because I in my last class in school, I'm deeply involved in political process in the revolution, Orange Revolution, of the supporting of Viktor Yushchenko. And after that, I choose to be a political scientist. And today I work in a cross-sectoral area. It's between human rights, communications, and culture. And it's about soft power, how to present it Ukraine, how to present it Crimean Tatar in international to the international community, and also how to present Crimean Tatars in Ukraine. Because before 2014, not many Ukrainians knows about Crimean Tatar culture, about Crimean Tatar traditions, about our history.
Right, right. And it's a fascinating history. And I wonder if you might attempt, just for our audience, to do a very kind of brief capsule summary of because it's a deep and long history. This is not something that began yesterday. It's surprising how little known it is, given its importance for the whole region, and kind of intertwining of the multiple cultures there.
Our process of national building were in Crimea, and three factors that help us to be Crimean Tatars: it's land, and it's Crimean Peninsula. It's a language. It's the Crimean Tatar language. It's Turkic branch of languages, and also Islam religions. But today, I say that Crimean Tatars, we like translators between two big contexts. First, it's Ukrainian European context. Second, it's Turkish Muslim context. And that's why we during all of our history, we have this very role of communicators between few lands, few worlds in our region. And you know that Crimean Tatars, during few centuries, we have our own independent state, Crimean Khanate. But after the first annexation by Catherine,
when was that?
It was in 18th century.
Right.
It was in 18th century by Catherine II. We lose our state, and a lot of Crimean Tatars. It was the first attempt of colonization of Crimea. For today, it's the new occupation of Crimea is the third attempt of colonization of Crimea by Russia.
And in this sort of struggle for ownership of a peninsula that, after all, seems to be primarily the rightful land of the Crimean Tatars in this struggle for this between Ukraine and Russia. To what degree are Crimean Tatars able to have a say in their own sort of future and their own self-government?
Yeah, first of all, today full-scale war in Ukraine started in 2014 by the temporary occupation of Crimea by Russia. Mm. And Crimean Tatars, we have our own identity. We have our own traditions, religion, but very important thing, Crimean Tatars is we are Ukrainians as a part of political nation. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to understand. Russians not understanding yet why Crimean Tatars, why Ukrainians fight against them. Because we have few common values. It's values of freedom and it's values of dignity. And it's not about money. It's not about butterbrot. Yeah. In Russia, it's not about television. It's about your own dignity and freedom, and that's why we struggle for our freedom.
So you're suggesting that after the fall of the Soviet Union, Crimean Tatars experienced an opportunity to sort of for the community to flourish and grow, excuse me, in kind of according to their own terms, mm-hmm. And that you're suggesting that there has been a kind of repression of the culture since the occupation of Crimea.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can just, Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians with a very clear national identities have been viewed as a threat to Russia's security in Crimea by the peninsula occupying authorities since 2014. And that's why the Russian authorities destroyed tangible and intangible cultural heritage that does not fit into the Kremlin's modern ideology. Mm. One good example is the fate of the Khan's Palace in Bakhchisarai. It's a crucial object of the tangible heritage of Crimean Tatar. It's being destroyed the gears of the restoration. Mm. One more example, it's about language. For today, just Crimean Tatar language is listed is one of the disappearing languages by UNESCO. And only 3% of pupils in Crimea are studying in Crimean Tatar language. To stop the language from the disappearing, parents create private initiatives in Crimea for learning language, as well as speak at home with their children. And my parents told me that the same situation was in Soviet Union when the parents spoke Crimean Tatar language at home that helps to preserve language. One more, it's about Crimean Tatar religious identity. For today, Russians trying to using our identity against us by fabricating the image of Muslim terrorists or extremists or Crimean Tatar terrorists and extremists. I told before about a case of Nariman Jalal. But what important? Yes, our religion have always played an important role in sharing our identity, but we have one tradition, and its tradition of nonviolent resistance, both in the Soviet times and now. It's a fundamental element of struggle for our own land. And that's why when you ask about culture, when you ask about the situation with identity, I can just say that today we have a new colonization of Crimea. And this new colonization, it's also about identity, about destroying of identity. It's about the militarization of peninsula, and not only the militarization of peninsula, militarization of consciousness, yeah? Mm-hmm. And it's about the replacement of population. You know, I just give one example. Before the first annexation of Crimea in 18th century, 95% of all population in Crimea were Crimean Tatars. Today, it's just 15%. Mm. And after 2014, 50,000 of Crimean inhabitants left Crimea. 30,000 of them were Crimean Tatars. But we have the reserve trend. Half million of new citizens comes to Russia, to Crimea. And it's a, changing ethnic component of population in Crimea also.
Right. So that is a severe assault. This is a speculative question, but what is it that you think Russia finds so threatening about these indigenous identities? It has always been a mystery to me because so many other cultures and countries have found ways of absorbing and even elevating and celebrating the variety of different cultures within their boundaries.
Yeah, I think I have a very simple answer, because for Russian authorities, for a Russian state, the question of identity and strong identity is a question of their national defense. Because in Soviet times, the nations, Ukrainians, Crimean Tatars, a lot of another nations who had strong roots, they were enemies. The same situation now. For Russians, free human being with critical thinking, with understanding of their own history, it's also enemy. And that's why they fight against us. During these 2 months, I see how Russians work in Kherson region, that's the temporary occupied now also. The same steps were in Crimea. They kidnapping active people, journalists, activists, human rights defenders, because they are the voice of a free land. Such situation we have during these 8 years in Crimea.
What are the ways in which you are able to resist this pressure? Because again, I know I've read that many Crimean intellectuals have been arrested, those who have not managed to escape. Are you able to be in touch with them? And are there ways that we can support them?
Yeah, of course, we touched with our families of political prisoners, also with the activists, artists, writers, journalists who live in Crimea now. And for me, it's crucial to save these links between mainland of Ukraine and Crimean citizens, because it's, we have the same blood. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's important to support them, and to support, for example, the families of political prisoners. For today, we have more than 130 political prisoners and 200 children are living now without their fathers, because their fathers in prison now. And that's why we support these families. We support active people and new independent initiatives. They're mostly underground initiatives that, helps to preserve identities, due the organization of educational or cultural events or programs in Crimea, also media initiatives and human rights initiatives. And it's crucial to support them. Not only, it's not about even the supporting by money, it's about some capacity supporting to just mail that we know about you and now about your initiatives. It really helps them to feel themselves not alone in occupied peninsula.
So that's very good to hear, and of course I understand how valuable it can be to feel that you have been seen and are not forgotten. If there is some way that you could share with us a list of addresses, perhaps, of people that we could write to, I'd appreciate that, and I'd make sure that our viewers have access to that. I grew up writing letters on behalf of Ukrainian political prisoners back in the 70s. And I never thought that I'd have to do that again, through about the Helsinki Human Rights Group. You probably know about that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. And do you work with Amnesty International and such organizations?
Just today, before our interview, yes, I chatted with the head of Amnesty International in Ukraine. Of course, we have a strong connection with the human rights organization, like in Ukraine, also abroad.
Right. Great. No, I'm glad to hear that there is that kind of cooperation. I imagine that things have gotten harder since the war heated up on February 24th. And I wonder if there are any particular changes you want us to be aware of in the last 2.5 months since this war began.
Russians prepare Crimea to this full-scale invasion during 8 years. When I said about militarization, it's about regular army, it's about weapon, it's about some technical things. And now Crimea is a peninsula of fear. The atmosphere of fear, it's among the citizens, among the people. It's total mistrust between people. Because, when you have fear, you just trust to your family, to your close friends, and you can discuss the political topics in such small groups and small areas. It's one tendency. The second tendency is about how people can move from Crimea to mainland of Ukraine, and today it's not possible really, because Russian army are staying there and also can, for example, take young men or not young men, just men to the army. And it's one of the challenges for Crimean Tatar people now, how to save their own children from the Russian army. Yeah, because for today in Ukraine resistance, a lot of Crimean Tatars are in Ukraine army as a Ukraine volunteers, as Ukrainians who make some active steps together, and that's why these two. But during these 2 months, a lot of Crimean Tatars said that we hope that Crimea will return as soon as possible to Ukraine.
Well, I'm hoping that is that comes to pass and soon. I wonder if you might be willing to share with us something, a poem or something in the Crimean language, so that our viewers can hear what that sounds like.
Yeah.
And maybe you could tell us something about who that is, who you'll be reading.
Yeah, we together with my friends, with colleagues, we established Ukrainian Crimean Tatar literature project that named Crimean Fig, Krymsky Injir. We have 3 anthologies. It's 2 of them, and Crimea Fig. It's a project that helps to Crimean Tatar poetries, authors, translators, to share their thoughts, to share their texts about Crimea, and also helps to Ukrainian writers write about Crimea. And it's important to when the topic of Crimea in an intellectual scene of Ukraine, and not only Ukraine. That's why I try to read one small text by Crimean Tatar poetry. Yıllar dönümü Siyere Kokçe, Crimean Tatar writer, the poem Flow of Time. Yıllar dönümü bir adımı ileri ekası artqa, böyle yazılgan acaba halkının başına, ya da belki elimden kuşunu uçurttum. Ordım da söktüm kolumdaki ipni, ordım da söktüm. De güley bahçalar, de solup töküle çiçekler, tünümenki dostlar ecebi bayrak kotardılar. Yarınımızda ne var? Tokalana kalemim. Ordım ve de söktüm kolumdaki ipni, ordım da söktüm. De güle, de ağlay, de baka aynacı koz ile, Danışçın bir taqdir, qismet oldu milletme. Köklerge yetkazıp son ise fırlata yerge. Örülgen yıpmını söküle, kene de söküle. Yıllar dönümü ümitten kesilmem ne olsa da ögde. Men yıpnın ucunu katı tutarım elimde. Çok sefer gayrdan başlarımız da bir kere. Kolumdaki yapım yanı örnekli oraya.
Is there anything else you'd like the world to hear about your circumstances now, and anything that you would like us to keep in mind and try to do in the next months as we try to bring this war to a quick and successful conclusion?
Yes, Askold. I want to say that today our fighting, today our war, it's not only about Crimean Tatars, it's not only about Ukrainians, it's about all of civilized war. And please support Ukrainians, please support our state, support Crimean Tatars, because we should win. And after our win, we will gather in our free Bakhchisarai.
I very much look forward to that moment and to raising a glass with you together.
Of course.
To a happy future. Alim, Aliev, thank you so very much for taking time to speak with us.
Thank you.